I'm so excited that so many people have been able to join for this conversation.
Yeah, this is looking great.
I'm sorry, Catherine, I missed. Where are you from?
I'm at Washington University in St. Louis.
Okay.
Hi, Neil. I see that Neil is on the call.
Yep, I just saw his name come on up. It's awesome.
Am I the only one here? So far.
I'm gonna see if I can make you the host, Lexi.
What happens with that?
Then you can run the call a little bit more. Do you want me to remain the host?
Yeah, I can, if you would like to. I know Cristina should be here too. I know she was.
I feel like I should undock my computer since everybody else is on video.
Yeah, we did. Oh wait, Justin, you're in here.
Yeah.
Right? It's Justin, right? Justin?
Yeah.
Hi. Emily broke my charger. I didn't mean to. Hi. You broke my electric on it. You have fixing it?
I don't have any.
Can you order? I mean, I know not like the second one, but
Yeah.
can you order another one?
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So babe, he's going to be the first one who gets to see them. Hello.
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 Hi.
Morning.
I'm Ellen Rainville from Western New England University in Massachusetts.
Hi, Helen.
How are you? I'm Cheryl Lucas, and I'm from Worcester State University in Massachusetts.
Which university?
Worcester State.
Oh yeah, Cheryl, look, I know your name.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. We have a few students that are coming in, but you can go ahead and get going.
Okay.
I put this in the chat messages, but in case anybody hasn't seen, when we get started, if everybody could mute themselves just to improve the call clarity, that'd be really helpful. And then you can unmute if you want to say anything or contribute to the conversation. If you have any trouble, feel free to just let me know and I can also mute you, but I don't want to do that because I won't know if you want to speak.
Do you want to be the person on camera? Do you want to be the person on camera? No.
There's.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing great. How are all of you?
We got an awesome crew.
Yes, very exciting. Looks like we have about 12 people on. Well, we'll give folks just one more minute to join us.
This is so much fun across the country.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just wanted to give a little bit of a disclosure here. We are recording this call, and it started recording as soon as the first participant entered the call. I'm not sure yet what my editing capabilities are within Zoom, but just be mindful of what you're saying and also of background noise since it is being recorded.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I know I have a meeting at 1 o'clock to attend, and you probably do as well. But thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Cristina Reyes Smith. I am the Academic Engagement Co-Coordinator for COTAD, the Coalition of OT Advocates for Diversity. We also recently launched COTAD-ED for educators, and the primary aim is to promote diversity and inclusion in our profession, promote the workforce diversity of the Centennial Vision, and ultimately to help move forward Vision 2025 with OT for all people, populations, and communities. So I'd like to introduce Lexi, who is one of our COTAD-ED leaders and has been very involved with COTAD. We want to thank Catherine Hoyt, who is the current chair of COTAD, for helping to facilitate this session today, and Stephanie Lancaster. I'm not sure if she's on the call just yet, but she is my counterpart in COTAD and COTAD-ED for academic engagement. And also, very briefly, congratulations to Stephanie if she's on the line. She was recently promoted to program director at her institution. So,
congrats, Stephanie. That's great.
Thank you. Thanks, Christina. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here. I didn't put together an elaborate PowerPoint, but I put together just a very brief, let's see, can you see my PowerPoint? Is it sharing?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, great. Just to kind of get us started with a little bit of background with regard to admissions, and we'll talk just a little bit about holistic admissions today, but also some other strategies related to promoting diversity within our workforce. And one major aspect of promoting workforce diversity is that those of us in academia have to accept that the onus is on us. If we truly want to see more diversity in our workforce, as we've seen in our Centennial Vision and as what is recommended by some different organizations that we'll take a look at in just a minute, we are the gatekeepers into the profession. And it's through our admissions process, through our recruitment initiatives and our community engagement, as well as providing inclusive environments for individuals. So I'll just provide a little bit of background information and some different strategic ideas, and then we'll open it up for sharing what other people have been doing with successfully and or lessons learned, challenges encountered, and we'll try to wrap up a few minutes before 1 o'clock. So I wanted to talk very briefly from a national perspective and global perspective. I'm seeing the World Fact Book on my screen here, but it's not coming up on the PowerPoint. But if you go to this resource through the Central Intelligence Agency, you can see some pretty discouraging healthcare outcomes data. And I'm going to see if I can get it to share so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But with life expectancy in the United States, when I was a student 24 years ago, when I was a student 12 years ago, back in 2005, 2006, the life expectancy was number 24. We were ranked number 24 among developing countries. And since that time, we are now number 45 among developing countries. And with that, we are also ranked, up until now, we were number 1 for healthcare expenditures per capita, but we're actually now number 2. That just recently changed over since the last time I looked at this data a few months ago. So that's kind of good news. We're not spending quite as much, perhaps, or maybe it's the Marshall Islands are just spending that much more. But at any rate, it's something that has been attributed largely to healthcare disparities in our healthcare system. And due to access to care, due to social determinants of health, many of you are familiar with that concept. Also due to different racial and ethnic differences, as well as cultural differences, language barriers, geographic barriers, et cetera, that have contributed to these disparities in the healthcare system. And so let me see if I can get this other document shared with you on the World Fact Book. Are you able to see the CIA World Fact Book currently?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. So this is life expectancy at birth. So you can see all the other countries that are found before the United States here at number 43. And if you click on the US, you can get more information and details specifically under people and society. And so it's not just life expectancy. There are other features such as maternal fetal mortality rates. Levels of disability are not on here, but they are not good compared to other countries. So here's the life expectancy for males and females and compared to the world. The World Health Organization advocates for this biopsychosocial approach to health and well-being, where it's not just about the absence of illness, but really goes beyond that to a framework that really works very nicely within occupational therapy. So you can take a look at this at your leisure, but fertility rates were number 142 out of about 220. Here's the healthcare expenditures ranking as well. And infant mortality rate we're at about 170. And so out of somewhere between 190 and 220. So with those factors, the Institute of Medicine back in 2002 created this report on unequal treatment in healthcare, looking specifically at racial and ethnic disparities and research data showing that when you account for other features of who a person is and what where they live and their education levels and these different components, that there are still differences. And so they created these 4 different report briefs that they published back in 2002. And I'm going to pull up the one about healthcare system administrators, what they need to know about racial and ethnic disparities. And while this is coming up, I do want to mention diversity and inclusion goes beyond racial and ethnic disparities. We now look very closely at religious differences and sexual orientation, LGBTQ differences, and disability status, many different components that may leave individuals susceptible to discrimination or bias due to their particular characteristics. But for the purposes of background, we are looking at some of these resources in particular. So you can take a look at this. It's available publicly online, but I wanted to go down to the end where it goes into what can be done to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. And this is almost 20 years ago. I would go beyond that to also include some of the other disadvantaged groups as well. So they talk about health systems interventions, they talk about legal policy and regulatory strategies, as well as educational strategies. And they do talk about the importance of having workforce diversity in caring for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds for these healthcare needs. So let's see, I believe it's right around here. Federal, state, private stakeholders should continue efforts to substantially increase the proportion of underrepresented U.S. racial and ethnic minorities among health professionals to improve access to care among minority patients and to reduce cultural and linguistic barriers to care. So this, again, from the Institute of Medicine, then informed the national class standards that are put out by the Department of Health and Human Services, which I'll pull up for you. These first were published back in 2000, and then they were updated in 2013. So this is DHHS, Office of Minority Health. They have here an entire section on governance, leadership, and the workforce. So they talk about the importance of governance and leadership. And then here they talk about recruiting, promoting, supporting a culturally and linguistically diverse governance, leadership, and workforce that are responsive to the population in the service area. And then they also talk about educating and training governance, leadership, and workforce in culturally and linguistically appropriate policies and practices on an ongoing basis. And so this is a really seminal document. There's a PDF that's available. We recently at our institution provided a lecture series where each session each week was featured on one of these 15 standards. So we had a week that featured workforce diversity, and it was open to everyone in our university, employees, students. We're hoping to expand it to alumni in the future. And so this is sort of the big picture around workforce diversity. And I think a lot of the times we kind of we put the horse before the cart. And so I wanted to take a few minutes to provide this background. And then the last piece is around the American Association of Medical Colleges, who have been major proponents of holistic review in admissions practices, diverse workforce. Let me pull this up. Oh, I see what happened. Bear with me just 1 second, please. There we go. So the AAMC looked at everything that came out from the IOM and from DHHS and really embraced this concept of diversifying the health professions. Shown that minorities are more likely to go back to serve minority, underserved communities. They also, when students are involved in academic programs together, they learn from each other in unique ways that they be able to learn elsewhere. Our societies are very diverse locally, state-wise, nationally. Many institutions are also looking beyond it globally and looking at ways to better prepare their students for working with diverse communities. And so having exposure to other students as well as to diverse populations has been an important component for academic programs for preparing future healthcare professionals. And so the legal piece is something that has been evolving. It has held up in the courts that having diversity conscious admissions practices are acceptable within very specific with some specific guidelines. And so these are discussed through the Association of American Medical Colleges Holistic Review. They have an entire array of resources available about holistic review. And so we, in occupational therapy, when we talk about it, we really have been using this as a guideline. So one other piece that I have to mention is that the AAMC and the medical profession has gone so far around this diversity and inclusion concept that they actually have accreditation metrics that academic programs are held accountable for related to diversity and inclusion initiatives. And they go into what kind of pipeline programs are available, what kind of admissions practices are utilized, what kind of faculty are available. So we really have a lot to learn from the medical profession as a profession in OT. So 4 core principles that they promote are that with holistic admissions processes, the criteria can be broad-based. They have to be clearly linked to the university or the school's mission and goals. That's important, and it has to be documented as well. And promoting diversity is an essential element to institutional excellence. That's a really important concept because many people would say if you don't have diversity, you don't have true excellence within your organization. And so these are all tools that can be utilized in your academic programs to advocate for positive change in this area. So number 2, they talk about metrics being used with a balance of experiences, attributes, assessing applicants through rich, diverse interviews and selection pool processes, applying equitable attention across the entire candidate pool, and then grounding it in data with selection criteria beyond grades and test scores. And if we all reflect on how we entered into occupational therapy school, historically, it's very much about GPA and GRE scores. But to be a good OT practitioner, I think we would all agree that there's a lot more beyond grades and GPA to be successful. And so it really is about looking at those other skills, non-academic skills, in addition to academic skills, with regard to the students that we are bringing into our programs and subsequently into our professions. So third, admission staff and committee members giving individualized consideration to each applicant, how they may contribute to the learning environment in the academic program, as well as to the practice. And they talk about to medicine, but certainly there are applications to occupational therapy practice as well, specifically. And weighing and balancing the criteria for desired outcomes by the school. Again, everything has to be very clearly documented. Number 4, race and ethnicity can be considered as factors when making decisions only when that consideration is narrowly tailored to those mission-related educational interests. So again, it has to be tied to the institutional mission. And if your institution is committed to promoting excellent service to their communities, it behooves them to have diversity and inclusion related initiatives towards that aim so that they can meet the needs of all aspects of their community and not just one or another. So they also talk about having goals associated with student diversity, having a broader mix of factors, so an array of diverse factors that are considered, which can include personal attributes, experiential factors, and demographics as well. So this is something that has held up in the courts. And Fisher versus University of Texas was an important piece of a decision through the Supreme Court that came up, that held this up, and you can learn more from the webinar that they offer online. Recently, just a couple months ago at Harvard, there was a lawsuit for Asian Americans who were talking about bias in the admissions process against Asian Americans. And so that, I was trying to look a little bit deeper into it in preparation for this. It seems they're investigating it a little bit further to figure out what was going on with Harvard. And that's something, if anyone else has more information, when we open it up for discussion, we can certainly would love to hear some additional perspectives on that in particular. So some other resources are listed here. And then also, if you can do a review of current literature with regard to holistic admissions in research and across multiple professions, nursing, dental, medicine, PA, there is evidence that is evolving to show interviews and different types of interviews for diversifying student bodies. There's something called a mini interview where it's very brief and frequent, and then there are group interviews that can take place, and then there's also the traditional interview. So that is some of the background information. Can you see the PowerPoint still? Okay, so some general strategies, recruitment pipeline programs. We've had one at the Medical University of South Carolina that collaborates with AHEC, which is the Area Health Education Consortium. And these are federally funded programs really across the country. There's probably one in your local area. And part of their mission is to promote diversity in the workforce according to the needs of the communities there. And so they've been wonderful partners for us. We have almost all 6 colleges involved with that program. We offer a 1 week where we bring students to campus who are underrepresented. And I also wanted to mention that underrepresented needs to be specifically defined by the institution, and that might be at the college level, that might be at the division level as well. And so that is a part of that documentation that's a necessity when you are going into a holistic review process. The other piece I want to mention about that is very important to work closely with your university admissions office and the legal counsel to ensure that you're in compliance with state laws as well as national laws, as well as what the institution is willing to support in the case if there was some sort of legislation or some sort of challenges, legal proceedings in the future. So that's a really key piece. So with the recruitment pipelines, this concept is just that thinking chronologically through the lifespan of a young person entering the occupational therapy profession, they might learn about OT in college, it might be in high school, it might be in middle school, or even elementary school, or earlier than that. For example, if they have a sibling with a disability and they see the OT coming to practice in the home with the sibling. For myself personally, it was actually after college. I was 2 years out. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare with pediatrics. I didn't know what. And I was volunteering at the Children's Hospital here locally. And the little girl I worked with wanted nothing to do with me. She just wanted to see her OT. And I didn't know what in the world that was. It really hurt my feelings at the time. And I went home, I looked it up, and that was where the love affair began. And so here I am now. I'm so grateful for that, but I'm very passionate about recruitment and spreading the word about OT and what an amazing career it is for all people, for reaching beyond our traditional populations. And again, helping to ameliorate some of those disparities in our healthcare system. So the second piece here is community engagement. Having relationships with community partners is really critical. Making sure that people know we are occupational therapists. We're not physical therapists. We're not speech therapists. We are OT. And here's the distinct value that we can bring to individuals and communities and populations. We also have had great success collaborating with other academic programs at our institution. A lot of them have been doing this for a while, as I mentioned earlier, with holistic review and with diversity and inclusion initiatives. Dental and nursing have also had accreditation requirements around diversity and inclusion, and so we've learned a great deal from them. There have been some institutional partnerships. Historically Black colleges can be a great resource, setting up special trips or contacts or webinars, things like that. You can target also in your community certain student organizations. If there are particular areas of your applicant pool that you're wanting to increase the competitiveness and the competitiveness of your qualified applicant pool, you can be very targeted and specific. But at the end of the day, either we're bringing them to us on campus through specialty programs, or the onus is for us to go out to them, whether it's specifically from the OT program, or they might be someone who's a recruiter from your college to do that, but making sure that people at least know what occupational therapy is, and that it is a viable and powerful and very exciting career option for people. GRE prep is another piece that I included here. There are free resources available through local libraries, and so I share that with all of our applicants when we're talking about GRE prep. I think a lot of students don't realize, prospective students don't realize how much the GRE is typically weighted. I know for us, we've significantly decreased it, but it is still a part of our admissions criteria. And so getting them connected with resources whenever possible, making sure that our admissions policies and guidelines are very clear on our websites. If you have individuals who are their first in their family to even go to college in the first place, there's a learning curve that goes along with this process of application and admissions, and it may look very different to go to graduate school versus undergrad or tech school in history. So making sure that everything is clear and getting those complete applications, that's been one of the challenges that we've been encountering recently. And I'm getting a little bit of echo. Maybe you don't mind muting your speakers or your microphones.
Christina, while we're taking a sec, we're still seeing the holistic review screen from the AAMC.
Oh, okay.
If you want to jump, but then I'll hit my mute here.
Everybody could mute unless they're talking. That was
Can I just make this is Cheryl Lucas.
Sure.
How are you? Can I just make a comment just quickly about the GREs? Yeah, this is definitely my personal bias, but I do want to just, put it out there for food for thought. The other piece about the GREs is that it's very expensive to take the GREs. And so there's a lot of students who, they'll have these resources to try to, get a decent score. But yet, if they don't have, we have many students that can afford to take it 2 or 3 times, which is actually going to make a difference in terms of what a person's final score is. So if you don't have $250 to continue to keep taking it,
Yes, absolutely.
is excluding people that may otherwise, be okay. So yeah. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. And we piloted a program last year or 2 years ago, before we had made the transition to holistic review. And you bring up a wonderful program, or wonderful problem, wonderful point. That's the word I'm looking for. Where we were able to partner with Kaplan to have a discounted rate for students, and we brought them to campus. We subsidized the cost of the GRE prep for them through our strategic planning funds, and they were able to do an online program through Kaplan. They were able to take a test through Kaplan. We administered it here, even though it was a practice exam. And the students reported that it wasn't enough time. It was a very stringent 8-week curriculum for them, with the timeline in order to meet our admissions deadlines, unfortunately. So we put that on hold for now in order to make the holistic admissions transition. But that was one strategy, and I'd love to hear some other strategies in a few minutes for what other students are doing around the GRE. Are you able to see the PowerPoint now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. So let's see, building the qualified applicant pool, clear policies and guidelines, sharing resources, holistic admissions, we touched on the documentation. You have to document past attempts and show that you've tried other strategies without racial and ethnic factors, and you're still not getting the applicant pool and the student body that you would like. All that has to be documented, connected to the institutional mission, defining underrepresented minority applicants and students, working closely with admissions and legal, the interview styles we talked about briefly. Unconscious bias training is something that we are considering for our interviewers. We have faculty, currently 2 faculty and 1 clinician who are interviewing. And so that might be something that we will add next year. And then the centralized application service is something that we're looking to transition to in the next year or 2. That has been a tool that some institutions are using for reaching more diverse candidates nationally. And there have been some mixed results with that piece of it, but at least from exposure, it's very helpful to promote your academic institution, and also it's beneficial to the students, again, with that cost. They send their transcripts directly to to the CAS. They send their reference letters there, and so they don't have as many fees in the long run when they're able to use the CAS for their admissions applications. So this was, and I meant to include the reference for this article about racial quotas with Harvard Law. Colleges are still able to use them, challenging stereotypes, preparing students for citizenship in a diverse democracy. So there are some concerns with regard to this most recent Harvard admissions lawsuit, but we will see, and we'll follow it closely to see what it means for the rest of us. So.
Hi, my name is Mag, and I had a question for unconscious bias.
Yes.
I wanted you to explain that a little, and like, what is it, like, what are you guys seeking to achieve with unconscious bias? Because it's not even conscious, it's like a ghost of a ghost. So how can you guys even, I mean, not that how can you, but like how may you, address that problem?
So that is a wonderful question. And it's a concept that's not as widely known about, but unconscious bias or something implicit bias, is this idea that we all as humans, we have biases. And we aren't always aware of them, and sometimes we are aware of them, but we have to be aware to not let them adversely impact admissions decisions, and as well as how we interact with students, coworkers on a day-to-day basis. And it might be due to racial and ethnic factors, it might be due to religious choices, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, disability status, on and on and on. We all have biases. So I'll share a personal story of my own. My bias was when a Muslim family moved in across the street from us. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and there was a lot of hostility in our society with regard to Muslim families. And when it started showing up in my dreams, that was when I realized I had an unconscious bias that I needed to address. And I needed to reflect on where it was coming from, the fear, the feeling of threat. And now, years later, they're some of the best neighbors I've ever had. They are just wonderful, friendly, delightful people that I adore. But we do that all the time without even realizing it. And it might be based on clothing that people wear, but there are trainings available through Harvard. Harvard has an implicit bias test, started out specifically around race and ethnicity, and now they have religion and sexual orientation and other features as well. So I highly recommend that you all explore those tools and share them with your students, share them with your faculty as well, because it can be very, very insightful and enlightening. And nobody likes to think about themselves as being discriminatory, right? It's not a pretty thought. But at the end of the day, we all have biases, and it's a little bit more palatable to be able to address and reflect on and be intentional in the future about not letting our biases dictate the choices and decisions that we make. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Other questions? Other thoughts? And can you tell us where you're from when you have a question?
Western New England.
Wonderful. You may have said that at the beginning. Other questions? I have my chat open now too. So Cheryl Lucas included the link for the bias test. Thank you so much. So for admissions, specifically implicit bias, unconscious bias, your university probably has a diversity office, and they probably have some trainings available. I cannot hear you. Are you speaking to us? Can you hear me? You hear me? Okay, great. I'm not sure what happened with audio. So Lynn Wakeford mentioned the blind spot by Harvard researchers. So I imagine that was akin to the movie with Sandra Bullock a little bit, but talking about our blind spots too as a part of that unconscious bias. We don't know what we don't know. And we can go through life without, oh, that was the blind side. Thank you, Catherine. Similar concept. But we don't know where our blind spots are, just much like in a car when we're driving. And so sometimes it's having conversations with other people to help us. And at the end of the day, just interacting with people who are different from ourselves to get that exposure and to be able to learn more, whether it's in healthcare settings or local communities, restaurants, maybe attending a different religious service from what you're typically used to, or taking someone for coffee and just having some of those difficult conversations. All right, so I'm not sure from Western New England with the audio. It looks like it is muted, but I don't think I can change that on my end.
Yeah, sorry.
There we go. Okay.
Yes.
Did he have another question or
He
something?
just actually left the room, but
Yeah, he didn't have another question.
well, I think he was interested in a longer discussion about how do you address implicit bias, and how do you recognize it in yourself, et cetera. But when we're unmuted, we're discussing things we can actually do to follow up on your recommendation. So this is a great catalyst for us. Thank you, Christine.
Wonderful. So some other resources through COTAD, we have a website, COTAD.org. We have a toolkit our members have developed with a number of different activities that can be done with students or in the community to raise awareness about diversity, about inclusion in general. Also, through Georgetown University, there is the National Center for Cultural Competence that has a number of different assessments around culture and diversity. They have probably over 20 assessments available there that we can that can be used for training purposes. There's a new assessment that I came across recently, just in the last couple of days, and it's a diversity assessment that was published in 2015. There was a survey that's being sent out to occupational therapy programs, and I can try to figure out the name of that if anyone is interested. Other resources around unconscious bias or implicit bias that anyone is aware of?
I also wanted to add that on the COTAD website, there's a couple of YouTube links. One of them goes to the COTAD media page. One of them goes to just kind of a playlist of videos. That one thing that you can do because I know implicit bias is something that's difficult to identify sometimes in ourselves, and it can be a challenging conversation to have with others. So sometimes opening up with just a video kind of defining what it is and that we all have biases and opinions that we may form faster than we're even aware of. So sometimes starting with something like that. So feel free to check out our YouTube list, or if you have any suggestions or additions, please email them to any of us and we'll add them. I think sometimes starting with education can help about what the concept is, and then moving on from there to, do we think this influences some of our admissions processes? And if so, what should we do about that? Most universities, as Cristina said, do have a diversity and inclusion office, but not all. And if they don't, there are a lot of resources at other universities that you can see, available PowerPoints. There are available trainings that you can pay for to have faculty or staff complete. And then, assessments that you could do if you wanted to determine where your faculty, staff, or admissions team currently stands. But a lot of those, I think, are mostly encouraged not to necessarily share, because it is something that is so personal, and a lot of people maybe won't answer as honestly or truthfully if it is going to be shared. So I don't know that I would want to collect that kind of data necessarily.
This is Cheryl Lucas again. One of the things that I do with my students, I do use the Culture and Occupation book by Shirley Wells and Roxy Black. And in there are some different types of student activities that sort of talk about how comfortable are you being next to someone of a certain group? How, would you talk to someone in a certain group? And this again is a personal sort of, I use it as a professional way for students to really understand where they're feeling. I don't look at it. I don't do any of that. I just ask students to be honest with themselves about it. And I think that they're able to also really look at, really examine when you ask them certain things. Like, for an example, there's a question on a neo-Nazi. Would you be willing to work with a neo-Nazi client, right? And, I think people start to think about that, what would that be like? How do you feel about that? And by having those discussions ahead of time, I think that really helps as well to examine your own personal feelings.
Cristina, I really like the idea of, we know that we should talk about cultural humility for our students, and to broaden their and the depth and reach of their cultural awareness and cultural humility. But to bring that to anybody involved with the admissions process, I think is a really good idea and very pertinent to this conversation and this topic. You know, and that may be clerical assistants, it might be alums, it might be community practitioners, certain students who are doing the tours of prospective students, as well as faculty who are involved in that admissions selection and culling through the applications. And that's a very important thing to put in there, and I would say in a strategic, not haphazard way also.
Absolutely. One other strategy that's been very helpful at our institution is hosting panels, where we had one about religious diversity, where we had someone from Buddhist faith and Hindu faith, Muslim faith, Christian faith, and atheist faith to talk about what kind of life experiences they had had with discrimination in the community, and what were some of the healthcare factors that were impacted from their religious beliefs, as well as what do they wish or what do they think that future practitioners and faculty and students should know. We've also had LGBTQ panels that have been very insightful. Last year we had someone who is a transgender male who talked about when he became a male, it pains me to share this, but he said it was an upgrade for him because of the way people started talking to him and listening to him with a different level of respect as a male versus previously as a woman, that when he would just walk into a room, it was different. And so gender inequity is a very real thing in our society, unfortunately, still, and it's an important part of the diversity inclusion conversation. I do like to point to gender equity and women's rights as a sign of progress that could be made. A lot of times diversity and inclusion can feel very overwhelming for a variety of reasons, and sometimes people may feel hopeless or discouraged, but look how far we've come just in one generation with women's rights in our society. And I believe that we can continue to make progress for women, for others who have been disadvantaged through engagement with people such as yourselves, and continued advocacy, continued leadership, and continued coalition building with our leaders, with other organizations, with communities that we serve. So Catherine mentioned the new book by Lennon Grahal. He was our keynote speaker for the COTAD breakfast last year, and his video is available on our website. He gave a very powerful presentation about diversity and OT. And we do have some other great resources as well. So thank you, Cheryl, for sharing about occupation case studies. We also have, through the Ethics Commission, some ethics advisory opinions, and there's been one for a while on cultural competence that really focused more on the provider and patient interaction. But through a motion with the Representative Assembly last year, we were able to advocate for, I guess it was 2 years ago, for expanding it to workforce diversity and providing some case studies about interactions with students and clinicians and addressing fieldwork challenges as well, or that can be utilized for fieldwork challenges. And so that was expanded last year at conference around that time it was published. So you can use that in your classrooms. We also in AOTA have the Societal Statement on Health Literacy, which is a great tool for helping students to understand the impact of health literacy, more from a patient perspective versus admissions, but another great tool. And then our OT practice framework has a number of different areas related to culture. It actually, the word culture or cultural appears 36 times in the OT practice framework. So this is something that we should be looking at. And so having more diversity in our profession will behoove us to help with better patient outcomes, better quality of care, improve service delivery efficiency. The literature has shown us that compliance, trust, rapport, utilization, access to care, all these factors have components related to culture and diversity. And so I'm so excited that our board of directors has added a 5th pillar on diversity. It's in the works as of last November. And then also you have probably seen that with our vision statement that they have added as an inclusive profession. And so that is a part of the heart and soul of who we are as a profession and what we envision for the future with Vision 2025. And so with our students, with our faculty, if you're trying to get the buy-in, turn to our profession, to the leadership, and utilize those resources to help to make the case for some of these practices and specifically related to admissions. Other thoughts, questions, resources? COTAD-ED, as I mentioned earlier, we started a year ago. We're very grateful to Neil Harbison for his support. We've been able to work with leaders from MDI and COTAD to launch this as a resource to connect educators around workforce diversity. We have a Facebook group that recently launched. If someone would mind posting the group, that would be fantastic. We have an online Google Drive exchange folder that we've started where we can share resources with each other. A lot of people are not connected to Facebook, and so we have the Google Drive as a separate tool. We have an email list that Stephanie Lancaster has been managing for us. And then twice a year, we are now meeting, once at conference, national conference, and once at the Education Summit. And so we've been thrilled to have dinners that we offer. We don't pay for the dinner, sorry, but we set up a location and meeting time, and Lexi has been wonderful, and Stephanie as well, in helping to coordinate that. And we do have our location and our time. Lexi, would you like to share about that real quick?
I certainly may. Do you mind if I also add one more thought about admissions as well before I pull my
sure.
to make sure I give the correct information about the dinner? But to just kind of pull it back to a few thoughts that I was having, and all this has been completely delightful for all of us. So thank you, Cristina. But, you know, even when we do offer support or we do have resources available, I think we're missing this piece of allowing students to know those resources are available. And that's one of the things I've been finding in some focus groups that we've been engaging in with underrepresented pre-health students and those students who are enrolled in the program and talking about their journey to become OT students, in feeling really lost in knowing where to find the information that they need to navigate the admissions process, to set up those opportunities for shadowing, to know who to go to within a university setting and know that information is available. You know, at Wisconsin, we've been trying to make some initiatives for that admissions process, easing the burden, because financial burden is obviously very much a piece of this, as we've discussed. And it breaks my heart to see students who are still paying for the cost of the application when they wouldn't necessarily be needing to, but they haven't found that there are some opportunities there. And so I think that's another place we can think about in how we communicate if we do have resources and support and opportunities, how we are reaching those audiences, I think, is another important factor to think about. And then if you'll just give me a minute, I'll pull up our COTAD-ED discussions on diversity dinner information.
Sure. I'm going to see if I can pull up the flyer for us too.
That would be awesome.
At the Education Summit last year, we were thrilled. We had the current president, the current vice president, and the president-elect in attendance. And our strategy is we go around the table and everyone identifies one personal goal that they have for working towards diversity and inclusion in our profession in the next year. And with COTAD, that has been our strategy, and it's been very successful. We offer our minority mentorship program that's been widely successful. Catherine Hoyt's been very involved with that. We have the toolkit development we present at conference each year. At the Education Summit and also at the National Conference, we have a Conversation That Matters too. We have a 3-hour workshop we're conducting this year. And so we've been so grateful to the AOTA for their support and for the MDI for their collaborations. We've had motions go through the Representative Assembly to create additional tools and resources, and we're working on looking at the inclusion statement for the AOTA right now as well.
So I do have that. We'll hope all of you can join us this spring in April on Wednesday evening, April 3rd at 7:30 p.m. We'll be meeting at the New Orleans Social House. NOSH is the acronym. And the address is 752. Oh, Stephanie, please help me. Taloupoulos? Taloupoulos? I'm so sorry. I've never been to New Orleans. I'm really excited to go. But we'll have the flyer available. I'm sorry. My pronunciation was terrible. Okay.
Good effort.
Yeah, right.
So we just have a few more minutes. We have a quarterly newsletter through COTAD that you can get on all of our work. Oh, we have COTAD Awards for the first time, where we're going to present at our breakfast a COTAD Faculty Award, a COTAD Mentorship Award, and a Chapter Award. We have student chapters that have been popping up all over the country under Arame Anbarizade. Her leadership, she has quarterly calls with them for students. So you can go to our website at COTAD.org if your students are interested in starting one at your institution. But there's more information about the awards on our website. We have tools for working with the Spanish-speaking community. You can get information on our board members. And we have a service project that we're coordinating for the conference this year. It'll be on Sunday morning. We're looking at potentially working with one of the homeless organizations there in New Orleans. So do some more information about that. And we have
planning for community
COTAD-ED, where I'm going to go ahead and share that so you can see it. It has our flyer on it. But other questions, other resources? So here is, for today, you clearly saw that because you're here. Here's our flyer for New Orleans that Lexi was mentioning. And we'll plan to continue to meet at conference and at the Education Summit and try to stay connected through education and through email. In academia, everyone is so busy and it's so hard to make time for this, but we are also excited about it and we want to support you. We've given talks to students. I have one scheduled in a couple weeks to provide a webinar. Our members have gone to state association conferences as well to provide talks about diversity and inclusion and resources and how it fits within occupational therapy. My personal hope is that we will emerge as leaders in culture and diversity and inclusion one day. We have a ways to go in building our workforce diversity to achieve that. But at the end of the day, everything that we do on a day-to-day basis through our activities of daily living has some sort of cultural root to it. The clothes that we wear, the things that we eat, the activities we engage in, where we work, how long we work, what we do after work, what we do for fun, how we interact with our families, how we communicate with each other. Culture make up who we are. And so this is an area that occupational therapy should really be immersed in. And so we look forward to working with all of you in the future and seeing what will continue to evolve for our profession. With admissions, your interview questions can also ask questions related to service with diverse and underserved communities. That is something that we are looking for with our applicants. And we made a list of the top 10 characteristics we were looking for in future occupational therapy students and practitioners. And cultural sensitivity was a piece of that, as well as good communicators, organizational skills, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're making that transition to admissions, it's time to do some soul searching for your academic program and ultimately what your mission is at the end of the day and what it's going to take to get there. So thank you so very much for your participation. Feel free to contact us through the COTAD website. And if it's a COTAD-ED question, our email, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, COTAD-ED@gmail.com. All right, well, I'll be on for just a couple more minutes. Thank you so much and Have a fabulous weekend.
Christina, this is Cheryl Lucas again.
Hi, Cheryl.
How are you? I was wondering if you've heard about the Casper system. I did an information session yesterday with them, and it's a group of people who they're using as part of a holistic admissions process to look at professional behaviors and responding to sort of videos, like almost like a what would you do kind of thing. And I just was wondering if anyone has ever seen that or heard of that or anything like that.
No, would you mind posting a link in the chat?
Sure. Let me see if I can get that from her. So it was a very interesting piece because they've done a lot of research, and they're using them for all medical professions. And essentially, students would go online and do this, and you would get the results of how they did in sort of these 10 different professional behavior categories.
Okay.
So it was kind of interesting. So let me see if I can get the link to the person.
Thank you so much. The recording will be shared on the website. I think the chat will probably be a part of that as well. This is my first time using Zoom in this way, so thank you for bearing with me. I actually have to run because I have a faculty retreat and I was told everyone needs to be on time. So thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that resource and the others as well. I will certainly look it up. But thank you to Catherine, to Lexi, to Stephanie, and to everyone for attending today. And I'm so sorry I have to run. But thank you again. Take care. Happy weekend to you all.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.